Good evening, friends, and welcome to Sleepy Time Tales, a podcast aimed at helping you to get a good night's sleep. Do you find your mind plagued with the stresses of modern life, especially when the lights are out and you're trying to get a restful night? Does your spinning mind keep you awake? Follow my voice down the path towards a good night's rest. Listen to me tell a story that will keep your mind from wandering to your daytime problems. The ones that you can't solve right now and will be easier to solve well rested. Listen to my voice and allow yourself to drift, following the twists and turns of the story, but slowly letting go and drifting into sleep. Note for new listeners: if this is your first time joining us, part of the plan with the show is this long intro. This usually goes on for roughly 15 minutes. So if you want to get straight to the story, there is a timestamp in the show description that will get you straight there. But aside from the bit of promotion I'm about to go into, the intro does serve a purpose which I'll go into a few minutes. So I do recommend sticking around and checking it out, at least if it's your first couple of episodes with us. Now, many podcasts put their promotion and cup rattling halfway through or at the end. But because I'm hoping you're asleep long before we get there, I need to put this stuff up front. So I'd like to introduce you to our sponsor. If you've been listening for a while, you may have heard about this already, but it's quite an interesting and exciting one, and it's a great partnership that I'm quite excited about. Mental health is quite important to me. I've spoken about insomnia as the cause and consequence of mental health issues like anxiety, and my own issues with anxiety that keep me awake. I don't like to overstate it because there's a lot of people that have it a lot worse, but it's very real. So I'd like to talk to you about BetterHelp. That's BetterHelp, H-E-L-P. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can start communicating in under 24 hours once signing up. It is not a crisis line. It is not self-help. What we're talking about here is professional counseling done securely online. There's a broad range of expertise in BetterHelp's counseling network, some of which may not be available locally in many areas, which is something I understand is a common problem. The service is available for clients worldwide. You can log into your account at any time and send a message to your counselor, and you'll get timely and thoughtful responses. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so that you won't ever have to sit in a waiting room as with traditional therapy. It's a common problem as well, as people struggle to find a counselor who really understands them and who they can connect to. So BetterHelp makes this easier by making it easy and free to change counselors if you need to. BetterHelp is more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial aid is available for qualifying applicants. BetterHelp, as well as Sleepy Time Tales, wants you to start living a happier life today. So visit trybetterhelp.com/sleepytime. That's trybetterhelp.com/sleepytime and join the over 500,000 people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. There's a special offer is available to Sleepy Time Tales listeners. You get 10% off your first month if you use that link I gave you. So once again, that's trybetterhelp.com/sleepytime, and you will find that linked in the show notes as well. So you can go directly from there. And other than supporting BetterHelp, there are other ways you can support the show as well. If you're finding that the show helps you to get a good night's sleep, weekly, nightly, or however often you listen, and you would like to help me to keep the show running and for free, I'd like you to consider signing up at patreon.com/sleepytimetales, also linked in the show notes, to help support the work that I do and help Sleepy Time Tales to continue to help yourself and others. There are bonuses available for supporters on Patreon, so take a look at the support levels that are available. So other than the satisfaction of helping the show to grow and reach more people, there are bonus episodes, special edits, and if you sign up at the $5 level, or if you're currently at the $5 level and you haven't gotten one before, I will send you a fun touristy postcard from Durban, South Africa in the mail. So if you're finding it beneficial and have the means and inclination to help me keep the show going and available for hundreds of people, or if not thousands, to help them get a good night's sleep, as well as potentially help me to reach new listeners, please consider signing up at whatever level is comfortable to you. Another huge way you can help is to simply spread the word. If there's someone in your life who you think will benefit from Sleepy Time Tales and help them get a good night's sleep, just tell them about it. If it's someone you know in person, let them know. If you tell people online, if you recommend it on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, tag me in. Well, not so much Facebook, I guess, but on Twitter or Instagram, tag me in at Sleepy Time Tales. And I'll give you a shout out and thank you properly. A couple of other minor options as well. We also have an Audible trial that you can take a look at and sign up there. audibletrial.com/sleepytime and get a 30-day free trial with a free audiobook to keep, as well as the fact that I've quietly put up a little Redbubble store, which you can also hit the link in the show notes if you would like to maybe take a look at buying some pillows or some sleepwear or anything else that's with my little sleeping star logo, which I'm quite fond of. If you'd like to take a look there, hit the link in the show notes and go take a look. Last but not least, of course, I'd like to shout out the music for the show, which is a very important part of the identity of the show. The song is Un Desert by Kumiko. It's available on the Free Music Archive along with a lot of their other work. And I've linked their website and their Patreon in the show notes, as I've got some very cool stuff that they've released under various names that I recommend taking a look at. So thank you for your patience and thank you for sitting through this, and let's get back to the show. So what exactly is Sleepy Time Tales? What is it for? It's a bit of a strange idea, isn't it? A podcast that you're supposed to fall asleep to. But lack of sleep is a health crisis in the 21st century, and this is a podcast that is intended to help those that it can to get a restful night. Do you find yourself lying awake at night with your mind spinning and emotions in turmoil with anxieties of 21st century life? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and find yourself not quite able to doze back off at 3 a.m.? I'm here to help. My name is Dave, and I'm your narrator, here to help you into a restful night. I'm someone who has struggled to sleep ever since I was a baby. My parents had sleepless nights with me for many years, and even once I got old enough not to bother them anymore, sleep was always a struggle for me. It was fairly recently in the last couple of years that I accidentally discovered the tendency for droning male voices to act almost like a tranquilizer for me. I used to lie in bed listening to podcasts, mostly about video games, and I would find myself suddenly waking up at the music at the end because I dozed off while they were droning on at me. So I started listening to some other podcasts specifically for the purpose of falling asleep. Eventually, I actually discovered that there are others out there intended specifically for that purpose. People out there using their droning voices and tastes in storytelling to help others to get a good night. I tried out a few and quite liked them, but often when I recommended them to other people, the others didn't enjoy them for various reasons, often being because of the person's voice. And I thought to myself, I've got a boring, deep, drony voice, so let me see if I can use it to help some people out. And that's how I started up Sleepy Time Tales. Now, every episode starts with this long intro. It usually runs on with the promotional stuff for roughly 15 minutes. And it's one of those things that not everybody likes it because some do find it annoying, but it actually is there for a reason. So I ask for your patience, especially if you're a new listener. Just stick it out a bit and see how it goes. The initial reason for the long intro is to explain to people what the show is about. I've already explained to you how I came to it, and I'm going to explain to you how I think it might be best for you to engage with it. And for people who've been listening to the show for a while, this intro is something like, it's kind of part of the process, part of the new habit we're creating to help get a good night's sleep. This is the chance to, before getting to the story, for them to pop their earbuds in and brush their teeth and have a drink of water. Make sure your bedroom is not too warm, but still snuggle yourself nicely into your blankets and get ready for that night's sleep. We're here to prepare that space and to prepare themselves for the space that we're building together, the space of rest and relaxation. Now, as I mentioned, there's a couple of different possible ways to engage with the show. For me, when I listen to my sleep podcast at night, I need something to actually listen to. I need to engage and have something to focus on, because stresses and anxieties are something that play on my mind and keep me awake staring at the ceiling. So I need something else to think about and something else to focus on, so that when sleep comes for me, I can't resist. For some people, it might be something a little bit more primal. Maybe they just need a background noise. For some people, it may be the sound of rain or the sound of the ocean, or maybe some boring guy just droning on about nothing particularly interesting. However you engage with the show, that's up to you. Whatever works for you, as I'm here to help you. Tonight's story is a beginning of an adventure tale, one of those sort of old school boys' own type things that you used to get back in the 19th and early 20th centuries. And geez, we even had some of those similar books when I was growing up in the 80s. It's the Ranger Boys, Outwit, the Timber Thieves. Very old school and very traditional sort of adventure story. Some bits a little bit more old school than I necessarily like. I had to edit out a few little racist twists of terminology that must have seemed perfectly ordinary back in the day when they were, when this was written. I don't think the stuff was even intended with malice, but the thing when you read really old books is it sort of, you realize how it just permeated culture. People didn't mean to be unpleasant or racist or whatever, but just it would just absolutely saturated so many aspects of life. So I did a little bit of on-the-spot editing as we go. Hopefully it all worked out okay. But otherwise, quite a cute, interesting little story. Quite a few knocks against one of the cat overweight character, though, so let's be warned about that. But with the story, what is important is that you don't force sleep. Keep a light mental grip on the story. Just focus on it just enough so that when sleep comes for you, you can't resist. You can't force sleep after all. I'm sure many of us have had those nights where we've tried and it hasn't worked out very well. If this is your first night with the show, with the rest of us here, be aware that this actually may not work for you. I recommend giving it 2 or 3 nights to see how it goes, just to sort of get over the mental hurdle of, first off, the idea of listening to a podcast where some strange guy tells you a story until you fall asleep, or to adjust to my accent or my tone of voice or anything else just that may need some adjustment. It's very possible you may take a few nights to listen to it. It's also possible that one episode isn't long enough. There's a long enough backlog that you can queue up a few. It's very important, though, that you try to relax. If you're new to the show and prone to late nights lying staring at the ceiling, accept that this may take a while for you. So queue up a few episodes or run through the backlog. What I do with my sleep podcasts is I just let them stream all night. Or I download a bunch and then I start with the latest, and then I'm usually asleep by the time the next one comes. But then in the course of the night, if I wake up at 3 a.m., which is an unfortunate and common thing for me, I'll just carry on listening and fall back asleep again. Sometimes I even wake up 30 minutes before my alarm. If that happens to me, often I'll just carry on listening again and I'll fall back asleep. And you may wonder to yourself, what is the point of going to sleep with 30 minutes before the alarm? But it's a strange thing in my experience that can be so satisfying. So satisfying. There's just something about it that's just primal and enjoyable, just to fall asleep again right before the alarm. And so you have the basic idea. You relax and you lie in the dark, and while you do that, I tell you a tale. So relax, dear listener, my nighttime friend who has elected to lie in the dark, listening to my voice. You will always be safe with me, because I'm here to help you relax, to do my part to help you improve your life. People don't sleep very well these days, and it makes life harder. So I'm here to do my small part to help you in a big way. to help you face tomorrow and the day after, well rested and better able to cope and process. One thing that's central for me in Sleepy Time Tales, and it's something that I'm trying to get more in the rest of my life, is I really want to focus more on kindness in life. The point of Sleepy Time Tales is to be kind to you. I want to share kindness with you. And I need you to be kind to yourself. No matter what I do, none of it's going to help if you beat yourself up or you rebuke yourself and you get tense if you can't get a good night's sleep. Even with me here in your ears, I cannot quite help you get over that edge. Frustration is a huge enemy of a good night's sleep. I know in my life I've had many nights lying frustrated to the point of tears and just angry that I can't sleep. And what good is that? It doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help you, it doesn't help me, and it sure is not going to help you the next morning when you haven't slept and you've been stewing on anger all night. This show is here to help short circuit that frustration that we get, to distract the feeling we get when we blame ourselves for not being able to let go and drift into the dark. So take a breath, forgive the fact that you can't sleep, and let my voice wash over you. Take another breath. Imagine the warm darkness rising up, inviting you to sleep into a better life starting tomorrow. And if you can't let go, forgive yourself and try again tomorrow. If you've had a life of insomnia, sleep is something like an enemy, but it is not your enemy. It's a natural process that we've been pulled away from by stress and life and progress that shines bright lights in our eyes at all hours. I'm here to work with you, to create a safe space, a cocoon in which you can curl up and allow nature to take its course. So if you're still with me, thank you for staying. If you're already asleep, we'll chat again soon. And of course, you aren't hearing me, except maybe in a dream. The Ranger Boys Outwit the Timber Thieves by Claude A. LaBelle. Chapter 1. The Start of New Adventures. Bangor, Bangor, all change for Portland, Boston, and Way stations, shouted the train man. Here we are, boys, shouted Gary Boone. Wake up, Dick, let's get our packs and rifles. We will be in the station in a few seconds now. Ma, but I'll be glad to see Dad again, and he promises us some real action too. I wonder what trouble he is in. You remember he hinted at something of the sort in the letter he wrote us at Hobart. Well, we'll know in a few minutes now, for your father will be waiting for us at the Bangor house. Don't fret over what he wants, Gary. Just be glad that we have a chance to get into action of some kind. These past few weeks have gotten me so that I'm not happy if we don't have a few scrapes to get in and out of, remarked the second of the trio of boys. Dick Wallace, a plump, heavy-set chap, yawned and rubbed the sleep from his eyes and then got up and stretched his cramped limbs. He had been napping for more than an hour. At that moment, the train drew into the station with a screeching of brakes, and the boys, having dug out their knapsacks and rifles from between the seats where they had stowed them, soon were off the train and walking briskly towards the Bangor house. Why not take a car? There ought to be one along in a minute or two, half grumbled Dick. It must be explained that Dick, because of his weight, took the easiest method of doing anything wherever possible. This does not mean that he ever shirked his duty, or that he was incapable of walking whenever he had to. As a matter of fact, he had made long hikes in the woods without ever batting an eyelash. But he believed in doing such things only when they were necessary. Trust Dick to want a streetcar and something to eat the minute he gets to a city, laughed Gary. Yes, I bet he is starving right now, jibed Phil Durant. All he has had to eat since lunchtime is an apple, 3 bananas, and I don't know how many bags of peanuts. If the train boy hadn't made a sale all afternoon except to Dick, he would have made a day's pay anyway. That reminds me that it's almost supper time now, said Dick. He had heard his chums rag him so many times about his appetite that their remarks rolled off him as does water off a duck's back. I move we postpone hearing what Dad Boone has to tell us until after we have eaten. Then he can tell us what he wants, and after that perhaps we can all go to a movie show. There was no car in sight, so they continued their walk and soon were at the doors of the Bangor house, a large, well-appointed hotel. The boys cut a strange figure as they walked through the lobby, for they were clad in broad-brimmed Stetson army hats, khaki coats cut like hunter's jackets with big roomy pockets, and khaki trousers stuffed into the tops of shoe packs, which are nothing more than heavy moccasins with an extra leather sole. Each boy carried a knapsack on his back, and attached to this was a lariat. In addition, a stout forest hatchet was thrust through the belt that girdled them, and each boy carried a rifle. Many curious looks were cast in their directions as they walked to the desk where Gary asked if Mr. Boone was registered there. In a few moments, the clerk had telephoned up to Gary's father and immediately was told to send the boys up. Following in the wake of the bellboy, they ascended to the room where Mr. Boone was waiting. He greeted the boys heartily and commented on their healthy appearance, for the sun and open air had made them tanned as any woodsman. Greetings over, Mr. Boone remarked, "Before I tell you boys why I have sent for you, I suggest that we get our dinner and then come back to the room." "Welcome words," uttered Dick enthusiastically. "I thought that would hit the spot with you, Dick," laughed Mr. Boone. "Yes," said Gary. "He is starving to death. He hasn't had anything to eat for nearly an hour and a half." Leading the way, Mr. Boone headed the boys towards the dining room, while they unanimously ordered a fine steak and soon were busily eating. As they eat, let us look them over and get acquainted with them. Those of our readers who have read the 3 volumes preceding this one, The Ranger Boys to the Rescue, The Ranger Boys Find the Hermit, and The Ranger Boys and the Border Smugglers, already know our heroes. Others must be introduced. The leader of the trio is Garfield Boone. He is generally known as Gary. The stout boy with the long-distance appetite is Dick Wallace, close friend of Gary and ward of Mr. Boone. The third is Phil Durant, a boy of French-Canadian parentage. The 3 boys live in a small Maine town only a few miles from Portland, the principal city of the Pine Tree State as our northernmost commonwealth is known. They have just completed their junior year in high school, and it has been decided that Gary and Dick shall go to a military school the coming fall, while Phil will have to remain and finish at the high school. Hence they wanted to spend their last vacation together, and had picked on the idea of taking a camping trip to the woods. Mr. Boone, father of Gary, who owned extensive lumber tracts in the Maine woods and was connected with some of the big paper mills of the state, came to bat with an idea that pleased the boys immensely. It was to this effect, that instead of going on a mere camping trip, which might prove to be tiresome before it was concluded, that the boys become attached to the Forest Ranger Service as an extraordinary unit of this woodcraft outfit. Their duties would be the same as those of the older rangers, that is to guard the forest from fire peril where they constantly menace the timberlands of the state. In this service there were 2 branches, the men who act as lookouts, having an unchanged station, and the patrolmen who travel over a certain set course watching that fire does not start, and keeping careless campers from starting fires in dangerous spots. In a few days the boys had outfitted themselves and were on their way to their first station, at the Sawdunk Mountain, a tract of timberland owned by Mr. Boone. They had no thought of any adventure other than that which might be caused by the discovery of a fire. But on their second night on the trail, they find the guide they hired, one Jean Leblanc, a French-Canadian, trying to steal their supplies. They drive him away and later find he is inimical to them because of a fancied grievance he has against the elder Boone. They also make a staunch friend in the person of Nate Webster, an old Maine guide. Later, Webster replaces the deputy ranger, Anderson by name, who has proved incompetent, and Anderson joins forces with LeBlanc and becomes an enemy of the Ranger Boys, and nearly succeeds in doing them great harm. Another friend is made in the person of an old hermit, who on several occasions warns the boys of impending peril by sending them cryptic notes. On one occasion, Jean LeBlanc kidnaps the little daughter of a family by the name of Graham, who are camping in the woods. With the aid of a note from the hermit, the boys are able to rescue her and capture LeBlanc. The latter, however, escapes and makes much trouble for the boys, finally setting fire to the woods. He and Anderson escape by climbing a sheer cliff. Still later, the boys are asked by the Customs Secret Service to get evidence of a gang of smugglers on the Canadian border. This they do, and the gang is seized, all except LeBlanc, who dodges back across the boundary and is hence safe from arrest since he is on Canadian territory and not amenable to United States law. During a rainy season, they seek out the hermit and find him. That is, Dick finds him. One of the greatest adventures during the search for a gang of border smugglers is the finding, with the aid of an old map, of a tourmaline mine. The boys get a deed to the mineral rights of the land and plan at a later date to mine the gems and make a handsome income for themselves. It must also be explained that there is a mystery connected with Dick. His father was a college professor of geology and botany and a classmate of Mr. Boone. He had a fall from a horse that destroyed his memory, and before an operation could be performed, disappeared. Dick's mother had died when he was a baby, and so being without parents or home, Mr. Boone had become his guardian, bringing him up with his own son, Gary. Now that we have a brief sketch of the boys and their previous activities, let's see what Mr. Boone's need of them is. "Here is the whole story, boys," said Mr. Boone as they finished their dinner and returned to his room. "As you know, I have extensive interests not only in the timberland but in the mills that manufacture paper. Recently, I severed connection with several of the mills and put all of my eggs in one basket, so to speak, by investing all my funds in one mill. Of course, it is impossible to do business on a big scale without making many business enemies, or at least determined rivals. I have a good many such, and I have been given to understand that several of them have pooled their resources and become connected with the mills from which I withdrew my money. Of course, I have not enough work in my one mill to take care of all the timber that I can cut, so I contract to supply other mills, necessarily becoming a rival of some of the other timber owners. Then, too, I have recently decided to start an experiment in summer lumbering. You know, of course, that Maine's lumber cutting season has always been in the winter, because the logs could be cut and hauled over the snow to the rivers, and then when the spring unleashed the icebound rivers, the logs could be driven down to the mills. However, I'm figuring on getting out lumber for building during the summer, and in the winter getting the logs for the pulp mills to grind ready for the making of paper. I have several important contracts with a time limit. That is, the necessary amount of lumber must be gotten out by a certain date, else I forfeit my profit and large damages besides. Lately, I have seen from my reports that the lumber is not being gotten out on schedule time. Whenever I come and look it over or send a representative, everything goes like clockwork. But the moment that I turn my back, a saw breaks, making a week's delay, or a tractor is broken, or something else happens. Unfortunately, my financial affairs at the present time are in such shape that I must devote the greater part of my time to keeping the wheels going. This necessitates my being much of the time in Boston and New York. Hence, I cannot be at the cutting operations all the time. I have changed managers, but still no good comes of it. Now I am confident that the morale of my camp is being undermined by some business rivals, and there is underground work of some sort going on. Since your success in getting that gang of smugglers, the complete story of which I have already heard, I believe that you boys can find out what is going on at the camp to hinder my contracts. I have thought that you boys might go to the vicinity of the cutting and sawmills and camp there. You would have the freedom of the camp, as I would write the manager who you were, and then you could use your eyes and ears and see what was what. I should suggest that you display a good deal of ignorance about lumbering operations and sawmill work, so that your presence would not excite undue suspicion. Further than that, I can give you no instructions, for if I knew what the matter was, I would not have to call on you for assistance. I am simply relying on you to be able to do as good a job for me as you have done for the Ranger Services and the Customs Department. In other words, you'll have to work out your own salvation, and I'm sure that you can produce for me the results that I want. Mr. Boone concluded his long explanation and then leaned back, letting the matter sink in. Then he asked, "Well, boys, what do you think of the proposition? Are you willing to undertake it? Not that there will be any danger attached, but do you feel yourselves confident of making a success of the venture?" The eyes of the three boys sparkled. They discounted Mr. Boone's belief that there would be no danger attached, for they felt that the proposition offered a chance of much excitement, and this was what they wanted. Thrilling adventures were for them the spice of life after what they had experienced this summer. Gary answered for the others. Will we do it? You bet we will. And we will succeed. Chapter 2. To the Rescue. After the conclusion of their talk with Mr. Boone, the boys went out to take in a motion picture show, after finding there would be time to see the last performance. On the way to the theatre, they stopped for a moment to watch a street fakir selling knives under a flaring light of a gasoline torch. Here you are. Here's a fine knife with your name and address inlaid in the handle, he was shouting. I think I'll get one of those for myself, said Dick to his chums. What do you want of one? You have your good heavy scout knife, haven't you? Queried Gary. Oh, I just wanted a curiosity for use when we come out of the woods. We won't want to carry a great knife like that in civilian clothes, replied Dick. We'll miss the first of the show if you wait, remarked Gary. Let the youngster have his way, Gary, interrupted Phil with a laugh. The street salesman made the nameplate and quickly screwed the transparent handle back on the knife. Dick handed over the money and soon they were on their way to the movies. They received a fine surprise when they reached there, for the picture being shown was one in which they had taken small parts when they encountered a crew of motion picture actors while they were at their first station in the woods, and when they had some stirring adventures the time Jean Leblanc set fire to the woods. The motion people had been rescued by the boys. The picture was a decidedly good one and they enjoyed it. The chums chatted during the play in a subdued tone, especially when there flashed on the screen the parts where they were playing roles. The water scene where Dick first did some fine swimming was particularly good. After the picture was over, they edged out through the crowd and returned to the hotel and were about to go up to their rooms when Gary had an idea. Say, boys, we are not going on such a secret affair now that we cannot have Sandy with us, so I'm going to telegraph Nate and ask if he will bring us the dog tomorrow, or let us know by wire if he cannot. Sandy was the big Airedale dog owned by Gary, a canine that possessed almost as much sense as some humans. When they had gone on their mission to the border to capture the smugglers, they had left the dog in Nate's keeping, as they were afraid that the sight of the dog would bring to mind who they were to any of their enemies, and they had made several in the course of their sojourn in the Maine woods. To speak was to act with Gary, and he promptly made his way to the desk where the familiar blue-lettered lamp was aglow. The work of writing the message was short, and then they went to their rooms, first stopping in to say goodnight to Mr. Boone and advising him to see the motion picture the next day, so that he could see them in their small parts. This Mr. Boone promised to do, and soon all were sleeping the sound sleep of healthy boys with never a worry or care. Morning came, and with it the boys arose and hastened to the dining room to make the most of the brief opportunity that they would have for the excellent hotel fare. They spent a part of the forenoon in overhauling and looking over their radiophone equipment to see that it was all in perfect condition, for they had a hunch that it would come in very useful when they arrived at the cutting tract. This was to be proven true at a later date. About 10 o'clock they received a wire from Nate, saying that he would arrive in Bangor about noon and would bring the Airedale with him. True to his promise in the telegram, the old guide appeared at the hotel shortly after the noon hour set in, and with him was Sandy. The boys were seated in some of the armchairs that dotted the lobby, and in less than a moment the dog had found his friends and nearly knocked over half a dozen people in his haste and eagerness to reach the trio. For despite the fact that an Airedale is called a one-man dog, he distributed his friendship equally among the three chums. The boys were fully as glad to see their four-footed friend as he was to welcome them, and they cuffed and patted him strenuously. Well, boys, there's your pup, safe and sound as the day I took charge of him, and let me tell you, here's some dog. Saved me a considerable sum of money the other day too, announced Nate. Tell us about it, asked Gary, as the three crowded around the old state of Maine and shook hands with him heartily. There ain't a whole lot to tell, excepting that a few days ago I sold a small tract of land that I had to a queer old codger who doesn't believe in banks, and who paid me in bills. I believe in banks myself, but it was late when I made the deal, so I had to stow the money away in the house. I locked it up as well as I could in a small desk in the sitting room, and went to bed. About 12 o'clock, I heard it tearing around downstairs and Sandy barking fit to raise the dead. I hopped downstairs as soon as I could reach for a rifle that stood in the corner of my bedroom, just in time to see Sandy going through an open window. I chased out after him, but someone was just driving away in an automobile as I got out of the window. Sandy ran the car down the road a piece, but then came back beaten and tuckered out. He was fast, but not quite fast enough to catch the car going at the rate it was. Well, I got back in through the window and looked around. The window had been forced open, and the burglar was just evidently about to force open the desk, for there were scratches about the lock and a heavy screwdriver was laying on the floor. I figure Sandy heard him from the kitchen where he generally slept and came in and drove him off just in time to save my money. So that's all there is to that. But he is a mighty fine dog, and I hate to let go of him, even to his owner. The boys patted Sandy again and again as they listened to Nate's story. Did you find any trace of the robber? Asked Gary. Nary a sign except the footprints on the lawn under the window. I figure it must have been someone that knew I got paid for the land that evening, and that I kept a little valuable stuff in the desk. But there is no proof or anything to work on to determine who it might be. I don't care anyway, as long as the invader didn't get my money, replied Nate. The boys invited Nate to lunch with them, and this invitation he accepted, and calling Mr. Boone, they went into the dining room. In a few moments they were joined by Moose Boone, and the greeting between their two old friends was pleasant to see. During the luncheon hour, they told Nate of the new work the boys were going on, and while he expressed himself as sorry that they were not immediately going back on the fire patrol, he agreed that they, if anyone, could solve the mystery of the stolen timber and mishaps at the logging camp. After luncheon, the boys decided that since a day or two extra would not make any great difference in their plans, they would walk to the camp instead of riding in the hot, stuffy train. They decided to start that afternoon as soon as the sun began to lower, and make about 10 miles of their 50-mile journey, sleeping out under the open as soon as it got too dark to walk any further. Gary's father agreed that they could take what little extra time was needed to walk, and so it was settled. The first business of the afternoon was to visit a large grocery store and purchase enough provisions to last them on the trip, for they would do their cooking over an open fire along the way. We'll just buy enough to carry us over for 2 days, for we ought to reach the logging camp by late afternoon of the day after tomorrow, announced Gary, the chosen leader of the trio on all expeditions. This suits me to a T, remarked Dick. Then we won't have to carry so much extra stuff in our packs, and in this hot weather a few pounds saved is a boon. Trust Dick not to want to carry too heavy a pack, laughed Phil. There's nothing to laugh about, protested Dick hotly. That's just common sense. Then he perceived that his chums were ragging him a bit, so he grinned and, turning on his heel, started for the door, followed by the two laughing boys. The buying of the groceries took but a short time, and soon the bags were packed and they were ready for their trip. Goodbyes were said to Nate and Mr. Boone, and the trio set out on their long hike. Good luck, boys, and I sincerely hope that you find what you're looking for, because my affairs are in a ticklish position just at present, and unless I find the cause of the disturbance and thefts at the camp, I will be in a very serious way, said Mr. Boone as he shook hands with the three boys. Guess they can settle the matter if anyone can, remarked Nate as he bade the boys goodbye. They've done some pretty fine work for boys lately, and I look to see them get to the root of the problem and roust them out pretty shortly. Then maybe they can come back and take over the patrol for the rest of the summer. We're good for about 8 miles tonight, fellows, said Gary as they started, for it will be at least 3 hours before it gets too dark to walk any further, said Gary. Have you the route all set in your mind, asked Phil? Yes, I looked over a road map very carefully this afternoon, and the manager at the hotel garage gave me some other directions that we cannot go very far wrong, answered Gary. They passed well out of Bangor and were going along a country road just as the sun was setting, when a chugging automobile was heard back of them. Soon a ramshackle old flivver drew up near them, driven by a young farmer lad. He sized up the boys, then stopped his machine and asked, "Going far?" "On to Coulter," answered Gary. "Gosh, that's a pretty good spell to walk," answered the farmer boy. "I'm going on for about 4 miles. Would you like a lift for that distance?" "You bet we would," broke in Dick. This brought a laugh from the others, and they accepted the lift, for it meant saving almost an hour on their way. They piled into the old flivver and soon were rolling speedily along the road. Despite its aged and decrepit appearance, the car made excellent time, and the boys commented on this. "She's a pretty good old boat," answered the boy. "I didn't have much time to tinker with the looks of the things on the outside, but I managed to keep the engine in pretty good condition. You can't keep a farm car looking up to time every minute. Well, I turn in here in a minute, so I guess this is as far as you can ride, unless another car comes along. Will you come in and have a bite to eat?" The chums thanked him cordially but refused his invitation, saying that they would cook their own meal in an hour or so later. Gary looked up at the sun and then remarked to his chums, "It will be dark in 2 hours and we can make just about 6 miles in that time without exerting ourselves too much. We haven't done much of anything all day, so if we want to let out a bit, we can tack on an extra mile in that time, and so save ourselves a bit of extra walking tomorrow. Let's go." Hitching up their packs, the trio of chums set off at a brisk pace. The setting of the sun made it much cooler and the walking was pleasant. They passed through a small village and were well on the outskirts where the houses were beginning to get scattered, and they were deciding how far to proceed before picking a spot to camp for the night, when they heard a call for help and the sounds of a scuffle. In the gathering gloom, they could not see where the trouble was, but hastening towards the spot from where the voices seemed to come, they approached a bend in the road and turning, saw 2 men attacking a third. The attackers seemed to be rough specimens of humanity, while the third was a young man, fairly well dressed. They gave the affair the aspect of a robbery instead of a quarrel among a lot of ruffians. So calling his chums to hurry, Gary threw his rifle to his shoulder and shouted to the attacking party to throw up their hands. The surprised thugs took one look at the businesslike rifle in Gary's hands, and then deciding that they might perchance overpower him, seemed to be on the verge of rushing toward him, when Phil and Dick turned the right bend in the road. Seeing that they were outnumbered and with no thought of the fact that the boys might fire on them, they turned on their heels and ran. Gary was about to send a shot flying after them when the young man who had been the subject of the attack called to Gary to let them go. Just then he toppled over and fell full length at Gary's feet. Chapter 3. A New Ally. Gary hastily unstrapped his canteen and, unloosing the stopper, poured some of the water on the man's face. At the same time, Dick, showing a surprising amount of speed for one so undeniably stout, sprang to help Gary and unloosened the man's shirt collar. In a few moments the man had been revived, and when he had come to, Gary asked him if he had been shot or stabbed or wounded in any way. "No," replied the man weakly. "One of those jacks hit me on the head with a club and I guess I just got groggy. I wonder if you boys could help me home. I live a few 100 yards down the road." "Indeed we will. You wait just a moment and we will improvise something to carry you on," replied Phil. "No, you don't have to do that. Just give me an arm to lean on. That will do very nicely." The boys did as he wished, and in a few minutes of easy walking they came to a neat little cottage, set back a few yards from the door with a number of flower beds scattered over the little lawn. "Oh, Grace," called the man, and soon a pretty young woman came to the door. When she saw her husband, for so he proved to be, leaning on the arm of Gary, she flew down the path and asked anxiously what was the matter. "Nothing at all, just wait till we get into the house and I will tell you all about it," said the stranger. Then turning to the boys, he asked them to come in. Anxious to hear what the cause of the attack was and why the man had wanted the rascals to escape, the trio accepted his invitation and soon were sitting in the attractive little living room of the cottage. Now I suppose you boys who so kindly helped me out of a nasty hole would like to know what the whole business is about, wouldn't you?" asked the owner of the cottage. "We are rather curious," answered Gary, speaking for the others. "My name is Howells, Arthur first name, generally called Art by my friends, and I am a timber scaler by occupation. I'm scaling on the boon cutting a few miles from here, and the chaps who attacked me were, until a few days ago, lumberjacks employed on the cutting. One morning I found them spiking a tree and forthwith sent a report to the office with a demand that they be fired. For that reason they met me tonight and attempted to get satisfaction by giving me a sound beating. Perhaps it would have been worse had you boys not come along so opportunely. I don't think they would have murdered me, but could easily have put me out of commission so that I could not work, and that is one thing that I must do now of all times. But why did you want us to let them escape? I should think you would have wanted them put safely under lock and key for such an unwarranted attack, demanded Gary. Yes, Arthur, chimed in his wife. I would have had them arrested and given a good long sentence. They might have killed you or crippled you. There's just one reason. One of them was Dave Pingree, son of old Daddy Pingree who lives in the village near here. You know the son is a worthless scoundrel, but old Daddy has had so much trouble that I didn't want to bring any more on him by having his son arrested, bad as he is, and as richly as he deserves to be jailed. The other one was a stranger to these parts, a French-Canadian by the name of LeBlanc, who picked up Pingree somewhere in the woods, and who has been his constant companion for the past few weeks, at least since the cutting operations of the Boone Tract were started, concluded Howells. The three boys were so startled at the sound of the name LeBlanc that they jumped to their feet simultaneously and asked Howells to repeat the name. LeBlanc is the name, but why does that surprise you so? Queried Mr. Howells in surprise. What is his first name? Demanded Gary without answering the question. On the payroll, he is listed as Baptiste. We did not get a very good look at him in the dusk, said Gary. Would you mind describing him for us, please? This is a peculiar situation, and we will rather tell you about it after you have described the man, answered Gary rather agitatedly. Why, he's a swarthy chap about 27 or 8, just about the same age as Pingree. He has black hair and moustache and a jagged scar on one side of his neck. Probably a knife wound from some lumber camp fight, answered Howells. Gary sank back with a sigh of relief. At any rate, he is not the man who we think he is. The scar and the age settle that, although the rest of the description fits him well enough to make him a brother to Jean LeBlanc, the man we do not want to run across in this neck of the woods, replied Gary. Well, not that I want to raise any apprehension on your part or tell you something that is displeasing to you. He is a brother of a man called Jean LeBlanc. I happen to know that this is so, for one night the lumberjacks were wrestling in front of the bunkhouse and boasting about their exploits, when this Baptiste came up and succeeded in throwing several of the men with a rather vicious hold. After he had thrown several of them, he started boasting about his brother Jean, who had taught him the hold. I was standing at one side watching the wrestling, which is how I happened to overhear the matter. But why does the name of LeBlanc bother you so? He asked in conclusion. That's a rather long story, answered Gary, and perhaps I'd better start by telling you our names. These are my chums Phil Durant and Dick Wallace, while my name is Garfield Boone, generally called Gary for short. I don't suppose you're any relation to the Mr. Boone who owns this tract where the summer logging is going on, are you? Most people of that name in this state are somewhat related. In fact, I'm a second or third cousin of his myself, said Howells with a smile. Yes, I happen to be a son, answered Gary. Well, that is a coincidence. I suppose you're going on to take a look at the cutting, aren't you? This being a vacation time, probably you are camping and travelling around a bit. And Howells glanced at the knapsacks and rifles which the boys had stacked near the door in the hall, and which could be plainly seen from the living room. Dick was about to say something when he caught a meaningful glance from Gary, which was also seen by Phil, and which the boys interpreted as a desire on the part of Gary to do any necessary explaining that might have to be done. Yes, we were in this vicinity and thought that we would like to see how the experiment in summer cutting was coming along, he told Howells. That's fine. Then I shall see you around here a good deal, as I am scaling. Of course, coming from a lumbering family, I don't need to tell you that scaling means measuring the timber that is cut. I also do quite a bit of timber cruising, which, as you know, means traveling through the cutting, marking the trees that are fit to be cut. Your father is very particular about his lumbering, and he doesn't do as many of the other timber owners do. Sweep clean through attractive land and make it worthless as timberland for years to come. His having certain trees marked for cutting means that every year there will be a growth suitable to cut and market, and thus he is assured of a steady income from his tracts. Perhaps if you are not too busy every day, you could show us something of the lumbering operations. Although, as you say, I come from a lumber family, I don't know a great deal about timber cutting. About the only time I've ever been at the camps was at the spring drive, just to see the fight for the river, and neither of my chums know any more about it than I do. The first thing I would like to know is, what do you mean by spiking a tree? Asked Gary. I don't know that I can explain that to you without having you near a piece of big timber to demonstrate what I mean, but I will try and tell you as best as I can. There's a certain way to cut a tree, or rather, there's a certain place where one always starts cuts. This place is determined by the diameter of the tree. If the tree is 2 feet thick, the cutter measures up 2 feet from the ground to start his cut. Of course, he does not measure it exactly, but long experience has taught him to estimate almost to within an inch where to start. You know, some trees are cut by axe. Those are the smaller ones. But the bigger ones are sawed nearly all the way through, and then the axemen cut through just enough with the axes to cause the tree to break off and fall. Spiking a tree means to take an estimate where the sawyer will start, and then drive several spikes in using a nail set to drive them into the tree out of sight. The hole left will close up very rapidly, or a little dirt and moss can be stuck in so cleverly as to defy detection. But what harm does that do? I suppose it might kill the tree, but what difference does that make since it is going to be cut down directly? Quizzed Phil, who was an interested listener. It doesn't harm an old tree, but what it does, or rather, figure it out for yourselves. What happens when the saw strikes 3 or 4 heavy spikes set in the tree just in the path of the blade? The truth flashed over the boys in an instant, and immediately they felt that they had accomplished one purpose of their mission to the woods. They had discovered one of the reasons for the delay in the cutting. If several saws were to be spoiled, that means a delay in getting new ones. Thanks again for joining me on this episode of Sleepy Time Tales, the podcast designed around a bedtime story to help you get a restful night. New episodes will be released every Sunday night to give you something fresh to help you rest in a new week. But make sure to subscribe in whatever service you use so that you get new episodes whenever they come out. A reminder that the music for tonight is Un Désert by Kumiko. Check out more of their work on their website and their Patreon, which you'll find linked in the show notes. Good night, and sweet dreams.